afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this webinar. Thank you so much for your time. Today, we're going to discuss cloud migration, and we're going to talk about practical advice for moving to the cloud and how innovative companies are tackling migrations. With you today are also Jose Guzman, Eric Moore, and Samuel Torrera. And before we introduce ourselves and start this conversation, I'd like to ask you to feel free to leave any questions or any comments on the chat feature of this event. We'll be sure to address those comments later. My name is Rebecca Estrada, and I've been working for AgileThought for more than 8 years now. And I'm in charge of solutioning on the run line of service. And everybody you're going to listen today works for this run line of service. So before we start, why don't you guys introduce yourselves? Eric?
Well, I can start with myself. My name is Samuel. I'm a solutions architect here at AgileThought. I've been working here for almost 5 years. And I have a strong background in Azure management and operations, as well as designing solutions for the cloud.
Hey, it's my turn. My name is Jose Luis Guzman. I'm a solutions architect from the Run line of services, and my background or my strong background is on the security services. I have 10 years working in AgileThought, and I'm very glad to hear you today.
Hello, my name is Eric Moore. I'm Managing Director of Tech Strategy here at AgileThought. I am an ex-Amazonian and also worked at DXC for a number of years and specialize in cloud computing, governance, security, and am passionate about antique computers. So very happy to be here today.
Thank you, Eric. So the first topic that I want to discuss with you guys is what business challenges you're seeing out there. What's driving our customers to think about migrating to the cloud?
I'll get started. I think one of the biggest things we're seeing is consistently OpEx being something that companies are wanting to move toward, minimizing their capital expenditure, especially as data center leases expire, and moving more toward operational expense with cloud environments. That was a move for a long time where you can align business demand to your IT spend, but now security is starting to become an increasing focus for cloud migrations and a reason for these migrations. The security controls we have available natively in the cloud are just exceptionally strong, and we're able to go ahead and avert a lot of types of attacks that on-prem the technology required to go ahead and mitigate those same kind of attacks is quite expensive. So that's been something we've seen.
And more specifically, what type of attacks or what events do you think trigger most migrating to the cloud?
Lately, ransomware. We've seen ransomware be a serious concern, and when you're in the cloud, the data gravity concerns around performing backups are mitigated to some degree, so you're able to do DR far more easily and less expensively because you don't have to do that transport on an ongoing basis out of your on-prem environment. So there's reduced cost there. It's easier to orchestrate without having to acquire or write additional software. You get a lot of that natively. So there's a lot of benefits that come along with the fact that the hyperscalers like Amazon, Google, and Microsoft all have inbuilt technology to protect their hypervisors, protect their facilities that are difficult to emulate for within an on-prem environment. Pepe, I know this is something you've worked a lot on. Anything to add?
Yeah, it's important to have in terms of the cloud, the possibilities that you have the multiple strategies for the disaster recovery plans, business continuity plans, and in terms of the scalabilities in important situations should be considered in the design of the architectures. First, the correct design of the connectivity. You need to have the exercise from the CRDR for have a vision of the multiple hosts that you need to connect in the cloud or migrate for the cloud. The correct sites or virtual machines is the most important considering of your strategies of the migration. always you need to consider the modernization of your applications through the migrate is coming. And as far as possible, since it is more natural to use the scalability mechanisms of the clouds provides from you, like the scale down, scale up, scale down, scale up, and scale out. When you design or you decide move to the cloud as your main center operation, we must consider as part of the scalability concept does not only require being ready for times when you require more power of availability of, in your services, and you need to consider the security and designing the landing zone correctly.
Of course, the more features you use in the cloud, the more security aware you need to be in the end, right? And you need to think about these topics from the very beginning. I think that one of the triggers that has been going around for quite a while for migrating to the cloud, one of the motivators is, of course, remote work and all the situation that the pandemic created. So with regards to that, what are you seeing right now? What are you seeing that relates the necessity of working from home and migrating to the cloud?
I have many ideas around the COVID-19 pandemic in the world. We had to be resilient from the IT areas. Strategies had to be generated that would users to keep their level of collaboration intact, and at the same time, in the compliance with security policies, going through the robust identity mechanisms and information loss prevention policies is the big important idea or risk for the companies when decide the move to the personal of the working from home model. We need to in some times or every time, as you know, the call capabilities anywhere and the anytime for full of your employees that needs. In many cases, even to use personal devices with the company connections turned off, to be point to resolve in terms of the security possibilities, with the possibilities of software as a services that the cloud today provides. We can find capabilities from collaboration services, including security, single sign-on with using the industry standard protocols, possibilities to manage access profiles with exact permissions that each need. With profiling, you can to prevent the loss, your lost information with a policy, a strong policy to define the people have the permissions that need to working, right? It's that important.
Yeah, of course, bring your own devices here to stay, and you might as well be very protective of your information and be very aware of what you need to do to allow people to work comfortably from home, but also to be very effective in what they're doing. Yes. Thank you. So cloud is not new, of course, right? So everybody's using the cloud one way or another. Either you have your data center on the cloud, or as Jose said before, you're using some sort of services in the cloud. But what trends do you see right now? What are you seeing that innovative companies are using the cloud for?
A lot of what our clients, and we work a lot in healthcare and financial services, and analytics is the name of the game so much. And I'm going to riff off something that Pepe said about the increasing ability for us to really tie an identity, a user, to the services they should be able to or they need to have access to do their job. That combined with some of the new focus on data, that's really where we're starting to see zero trust security arise. It's fascinating that not only are we seeing that improvement in security, but also in actual business outcomes with modern analytics. We've seen a real uptick in desire for machine learning services and application of machine learning services to data sets to gain insights. We even had an engagement where we were using analytics to automatically comprehend contracts, legal contracts. And that's the kind of business challenges that are being applied, and the machine learning capabilities in the cloud make that much easier than if we were trying to do that on-prem. The other trend we're seeing is, I'm going to hit it again, security. Of course, right? And focusing on data and identities as the two kind of center focus areas for security. And again, that zero trust model that arises from having that focus, attribute-based access control for cloud environments, that's kind of a big trend in terms of what our clients are asking for.
Whereas the more data aware you are and the more you use your data, the more security aware you need to be, right? Because that's your most important asset in the end.
Yeah, I think it's regardless of whether or not you're focused on your data, the data's there and could be vulnerable unless you have that focus to understand what data is important to your business, what data is sensitive, and how that data is being secured and who's accessing it.
We're discussing about complex issues, right? Handling your data, protecting your data, migrating to the cloud sounds a little bit daunting at times. But I know and I understand that there are, very good practices that we can discuss during this webinar for people to understand how to safely move everything into the cloud without introducing risk and without being, concerned all the time of what's going to happen to your data. So can we talk a little bit more about these best practices that we can recommend?
Sure. Yeah. I always start with landing zones. I think really understanding how the cloud environment will relate to your on-prem in terms of network, identity, those two key pieces is so critical, right? If you have conflicting CIDR ranges, you're in for a bad time. If you don't know exactly how identities are coming into these cloud environments, you're in for a bad time. And standardizing that via infrastructure as code templates, whether that be in Terraform, ARM, CloudFormation, standardizing that up front and ensuring that it's consistent across every cloud environment, from your sandboxes to your dev labs, all the way through to your production environments, just makes everyone's lives a lot more easier and your developers' lives more predictable. So that's really where I start. But Pepe,
so
you want to?
Of course, good landing zone is gonna provide with a lot of confidence, and it's gonna make everything all the more smooth and better when you're talking about migrating to the cloud. And I think if you previously were thinking about using using tools for migrating, now the formula is a little bit more complicated, but it's also more predictive because you can use this landing zone in pair to the tools, and then you get very good results in the end, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And of course, everything has to be tied down to security besides doing all these identity management and every goodness that comes out with landing zone. I know you need to have other considerations with regards to compliance and security. And Pepe, I know you love discussing about these. Can you elaborate on that?
Yes, so sure. Compliance is another best practice that you need to decide to migrate or not. When you decide to move to provide services to our users in the cloud, wherever it may be, we must consider keeping our applications in compliance with each zone. Network or virtual machine, we must keep in mind the issues of security and compliance with the most high priority. There are good examples with the Azure that allows us to have control of the security and behavior of our infrastructure. Azure Security Center is part of these tools that you provide help to administrate from one side the vulnerability management and another automation of processes to mitigate risk about the IPs, ports, open ports, closed ports, and in combined with the log analytics or network security trust center is the big solutions to provide security and compliance for all of the infrastructure that you decide move to the cloud. When you know that each cloud is owning compliance tools, in AWS use the different ones with different objectives. We can combine GuardDuty with CloudWatch and achieve a great result in this regard. The most important thing is awareness and consideration when making implementations.
Of course. Thank you. Of course, you need to create the right environment for protecting your assets in the cloud. Absolutely, and these are very nice topics to discuss. It's very important to be always aware of security to create a good landing zone. There's also the financial conversation side of it. So I know there are best practices with regards to how you're going to manage your cost spend. And I'm wondering if you want to discuss that now. What can we recommend in terms of financial management or FinOps?
I can jump into that one. And as you said, that there's this concept of FinOps that we should talk about definitely as a best practice. And well, the way I see it, we can even build a whole webinar around FinOps. It's really a very complex topic when we are talking about the cloud, but we'll try to narrow it down and start talking about building a business case. We definitely want to build a thorough business case. It's really important to have all this clear because it's the way to justify the migration to the cloud. That business case should definitely include all the motivators and goals that you have or your company has for the migration, because you just talked about the modern remote work as one of the motivators to migrate into cloud. And we can talk about that one, or we can talk about, for example, innovation or compliance reasons, or maybe you need more performance, or maybe you only need to perform a cost reduction while migrating to the cloud. So we really need to have that clear for our migration. That business case should also include all the risks and all the pros and cons that we identified as per the cloud migration. Those should be really clear. And it should also include all the different plans for migration, the implementation, the operations, the run model. So all of that needs to be taken into account when building this business case. And finally, for the business case, we obviously need to consider an estimate or projection of how much are we going to consume on the cloud, how much are we going to spend on the cloud. And that obviously not only involves the infrastructure, the elements per se, it also involves all the different efforts of migrating, for example, the transformation or optimization of the applications, the run model, hiring new talent. So it's really a whole lot of costs that we need to consider. And with that, build compelling arguments for migrating to the cloud, describing all the propositions that we have for that migration. So that's one thing that we can talk about. Another topic that I can think of, it's the famous migration bubble and how to control that bubble. So in my opinion, one of the most common misunderstandings of migrating to the cloud is that we'll have instant cost savings. We all think that when we migrate, we'll start saving money from one day to the other, and that honestly doesn't happen that way. And if we don't control the costs of the cloud, they can go all the way up, and we can end up spending more money and time and effort and people, even compared with having an on-premises operation. So we really need to take care of that migration bubble. When migration starts, we need to start taking care of the costs, making sure that they are controlled, and that we are also using tools, for example, like the flexibility of the cloud, turning on and off instances or products based on their use. Tools like instance reservation. If we are planning to use instances on production environments for maybe 1 year or 3 years, we can start talking about instance reservation. Some clouds have also models of licensing optimizations, or we can also talk about tools for toil reduction in cloud operations. So there's a lot of concepts that we can use to really focus into that migration bubble and make sure that it doesn't go uncontrollably up. And I think that's also one of the biggest value that we can give to our clients when they're migrating to cloud. It's to minimize that bubble and make sure that it's controlled, make sure that it doesn't go all the way up, and that it's lowered down as soon as possible after the migration, by assessing, by implementing different optimizations to help the clients with this migration bubble.
Yeah, of course. Of course, the financial conversation can go on forever. And I think I love this conversation because it's very holistic, right? You have to see every single angle of a migration in order to build a good business case. In order for you to either, for us, for example, to assist our customers in getting, in being very, very successful in migrating, or for customers to be very successful in doing their own effort for migrating and controlling things like this migration bubble you were discussing, right?
Correct, absolutely. And we can rely on different tools to do that. There are cloud tools that we can use. There are third-party tools that we can use to control that migration bubble, to govern the costs, to take a look into them. Some of these tools might be free, some others might be not, but it's really to take the general goal is to take care of those costs on the cloud.
Of course, and think that from the very start, not just let it grow organically, but have a plan for financially managing your cloud consumption.
Definitely.
Yeah, and talking about what you need to do first and foremost, and how you have to plan and really be very intentional in planning these migrations and controlling your spend and so on and so forth. What would you say are the main areas you need to consider before initiating the migration?
I'll jump in here. I think, one of the things I see is identifying stakeholders as being an area that a lot of our clients, really, we assist them in focusing on. It's part of our methodology to identify and work with all the different stakeholders. And I think that really helps with our client success. Usually we are interfacing with a given leader. And these migrations impact so many others. Consumers of the services that are being migrated, sometimes a service owner for a dependent service that there's a dependency on, a technical dependency, to be clear. A partner who accesses these interfaces. That's a very common scenario. We see a lot with the B2B services that we assist our clients with. So really identifying the full map of stakeholders and understanding what their concerns and considerations are up front, and then being clear and consistent in how you communicate expectations around timeline, outcomes, performance. I think that's really a key focus area.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And all those are inputs, very valuable inputs for building this business case that Sam was talking about earlier, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Exactly.
So,
yeah. And one thing that I would like to address now is within, these discussions with stakeholders and defining that plan, you always have to be very mindful of what you're going to do once you've migrated to the cloud, how you're going to run operations once you are in the cloud. And of course, our line of service at AgileThought specializes in that, and we have fantastic models and different options for doing operations in the cloud. But what would be the most important things that we need to consider when we're talking about operations in the cloud? What do you think is the most important thing there?
I can jump into that one, and I like to break it into 3 different things for take into consideration with the one model. The first one is that it involves an important change in the mindset of the current operations teams. So your team may currently be used to managing infrastructure on premises. And that involves managing, for example, cooling systems, physical security, and different things that you need to take into consideration for all your servers to be able to run. On the cloud, all of that items are taken care for you. You only need to take care in the most in IaaS models of the infrastructure per se, only updating the OS, for example, or taking care of networking. But the cloud can also go all the way up to not needing you to manage an infrastructure at all. You can go into PaaS services, and that involves only taking care of the application scope. So that's really an important change in the mindset, as well as being able to develop, for example, using best practices on DevOps or on agile methodologies. That's an important change in mindset. Then the second thing that I can think of is that your team really needs to have the sufficient skills for running operations in the cloud, because all of the things that we just talked about, your team needs training, they need certifications, they need even new talent to teach them to have all of these new skills on their skill sets. And finally, on very traditional enterprises, we may also need an organizational redesign to start moving from a very vertical scheme to a more horizontal one, in which we have smaller teams that are agile, that have a very specific objective of managing an application or functionality, and that may again also require to acquire new knowledge, new skills, and maybe even new people.
That's a fantastic topic you just touched on, how you need to reorganize yourself in order to be successfully managing your cloud infrastructure, your cloud assets, etc. It requires more than just a little bit of training or introducing new skill set. It requires you to make a fundamental change in the way you operate your business now that it is in the cloud. And equally important is to select the right platform, right? To make a right selection, to devote time and allocate effort in selecting the right platform for you to adopt.
Yeah, so when you're talking about the hyperscalers, especially Amazon, Microsoft, Google, there's a lot of considerations in platform selection. We've seen Azure really become ascendant within the partner ecosystem and with our clients for another number of reasons, but Amazon has some very compelling solutions, as does Google. So really thinking about, do we want to go multi-cloud? A lot of our clients end up doing that by necessity through acquisitions as part of a technology strategy, even if they didn't necessarily start there. If you do go all in one platform, you have to make decisions about whether or not you're going to use, for instance, if you go with Azure, ARM templates or Terraform for your infrastructure as code. It's a critical upfront strategic platform selection decision. You know, are you going to use Kubernetes? Are you going to go all in on a container strategy, or are you going to go ahead and continue utilizing operating system occurrences? You know, there's no one size fits all, and really thinking about that strategy up front and making that a very conscious decision, I think is absolutely essential.
Absolutely. And also, and this is my 2 cents, you have to be as intentional with the decision whether you're going to do these yourself or you're going to build an ecosystem of partners that will assist you in doing this, in assessing how you're going to migrate to the cloud, creating the right conditions for migrating, doing the actual migration, and then finally doing the operations in the cloud that are not only successful in keeping everything, you know, in very well shape, so your business doesn't lose continuity, but also to understand how to manage your costs, how you're going to do these FinOps, very important FinOps piece of running your operation in the cloud. It's very important to consider that from the very beginning as well. Once you've done all these, of course, once you have a good plan and you were able to migrate your assets into the cloud, you need to be very focused on what's next, how you're going to optimize, and how you're going to get assistance for optimizing. What tools are you're going to use? What's the ecosystem of platforms and tools you're going to use to make things optimal and to really achieve savings in the cloud and all the goodness that comes out of cloud computing. I know we've done this quite a lot, right? So AgileThought has a very large practice that focuses on assessing and migrating assets to the clouds. What are the best stories that you have there? What are the do's and the don'ts, the lessons that you've learned when migrating to the cloud?
Oh, it's important to have some histories in terms of the bad histories or understanding another piece of the information to after migrations, before the migrations, and that in my mind I have the understanding the dependencies to be able to make an adequate migration strategy will allow us to maintain a high integrity of the information, availability of services, and will also allow applications already in the cloud with services that are consumed on premises to have low latency and high responses. Okay.
Super important, yeah.
Evaluate the dependencies is a big thing that you need put on the place after move whatever infrastructure. Okay.
Absolutely. That's critical. Understanding
Yes.
your dependencies, using the right tools for understanding and mapping out those dependencies, plotting all those dependencies is essential for a successful migration, of course.
Yes. And when you have the results of the dependencies, you need to design the plan to migrate another types of infrastructure. No, we have several ways to achieve this. For a simple mechanisms, such as lift and shift mechanism, to single more complex situations, such as rehost, rebuild, in which we must consider migrating the data only to new or recently installed versions on the cloud side, right? In the farming scenarios or clusters that replicate information synchronously required more effort and definitions to achieve this goal.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
So one thing, yeah, I think you really have to be humble going into a migration to some degree, have some humility, and practically what that means is overestimate your maintenance windows, right? If the team is 100% convinced they're going to get it done in 2 hours, get a 4-hour window or even a 6-hour window, just to be safe, right? And do some extra testing and set that expectation. And you know, be ready to go ahead and do that extra testing and use that time to just make sure everything's gone exactly as planned. Maybe even have a plan to do extra iterations of your test plan during that test window, just to have that insurance, right? Second guess, and you know, once again, I think Pepe hit it right on the top, nail on the top of the head there, with again talking about dependencies. I mentioned earlier stakeholders. Those dependencies identify stakeholders, shadow stakeholders that can be impacted. And that's another place where humility is so important. Expand the circle of people you're notifying about these things a little bit further than what you think might be necessary, just to make sure that you're hitting everyone who could be impacted.
And expect the unexpected, right? That's what you need to be very mindful of, the maintenance windows and the level of expectation you're going to set with the business. That's very, very important, Eric. A very good point. And more than often, what I see is that companies tend to underestimate the level of effort that operating the cloud requires. So Sam, you were discussing run schemes earlier. Would you like to elaborate on these?
Sure. So as we were just talking about on the run model, we really need a lot of changes to the original teams or traditional teams that are operating on premises. And we're just discussing about all of them. We need new training, we need certifications, we need new hires. And obviously, if we don't consider all of these from the beginning, we'll get into a point where all of this comes into the first day, and we are really struggling with operating on the cloud. We also need to take a look into how we are going to operate the cloud in terms of the architecture that we are currently having. For example, we are going for microservices architecture, or as I was saying, we are using Kubernetes, or are we using fast applications or agile methodology? So all of these needs to be considered for us to have a correct run model on the cloud. And these consider really added costs that may be difficult to look into at the beginning. And a good alternative also is to partner with a company like us, like AgileThought, whose business core is precisely to be able to build technology and high performance teams that are already trained, already certified, already know how to manage and operate the cloud. And in that way, your company is able to reinvest that budget that you're originally planning to use on the run model to innovate on the business core of your company.
Have a holistic view on things, right? I like that word, holistic.
It's a good word.
It is. It is. We have a very good conversation now about run models and how to operate and what's our practical advice for operating things in the cloud. And I'm wondering if we can go into a conversation for comparing and contrasting these traditional operations that Sam was talking about with different types of operations that include things such as DevOps or site reliability engineering, the more modern version of these operations. So who would want to discuss these with me?
I'd love to chime in on that one. I think there's really three main operating models I see increasingly in the cloud, four, depending on how you look at it. There's traditional operations, which are oriented around ITIL, largely ITIL v4, and often are delivered potentially in an ITO model, IT outsourcing, or managed services model. Then there's DevOps, and between those is CloudOps, which is where you're cloud aware, your people are trained, but you're still using principally an ITIL model. You're using something like a ServiceNow or a Remedy ticketing system, and there's still code being handed over the fence, but you are using landing zones, you are properly picking up events off the environment, you're doing cloud security, you're properly logging people in with federated identities, all that kind of basic blocking and tackling of a cloud environment. So we've gone from traditional to CloudOps, then we get to DevOps, and really, there's a lot of words that have been spilt over DevOps. Net, right? You're talking about having the developers, right, the SMEs, involved in the operations lifecycle in some way, shape, or form, and having a backlog of items in an agile methodology that are addressed in sprints, steadily delivering operational outcomes, whether that be automation content, whether that be better event handling, whether that be new metrics that better align to actual KPIs of the application. And then we get to SRE. And SRE is more prescriptive than DevOps, and talks about things like service level indicators, which show, which are well-defined numeric metrics, right? Very objective measures of the performance of the service level objectives, which are where those indicators should be, what our targets are, right? The concept of reducing toil, which I like a lot. I think a lot of operators like that concept. Really having an error budget and working towards that error budget, and having an agreement between the service owners and operations on how that budget is used, and allowing that to truly dictate the pace of releases. I think that's a really fascinating concept, and those are the major models we've seen, and I think there's a steady movement through from traditional to CloudOps to DevOps, and then for some companies to the SRE model, and that's kind of the pattern that a lot of companies, I think the industry in general, is going through.
Yeah, of course. And the more complex your ecosystem, your environment is, the more creative you need to be when choosing which combination of these models you're gonna set for operating your cloud. And Eric, I'm pretty sure you would agree with me in saying that there's no one size fits all. There's not a perfect scheme or a single set of practices that you will implement for being successful. There's a combination of various of these models, and you will take things from here and there to be able to make a tailored suit for your cloud operations.
Absolutely. I see companies, I have seen companies in the past, especially in my past life, that tried to do DevOps with new leaders who were principally focused on development, who hadn't really learned ITIL, right, and change management and that kind of thing, and that can be dangerous, right? So recognizing and valuing the experience of your operations leaders. And recognizing that ITIL still has a lot of lessons to teach, even in an SRE type situation. I think that, and again, it's going to come back to having a little bit of humility in looking at how you're doing your operations and learning from the diverse viewpoints of your employees.
Of course, and tied with all this discussion about these methods and frameworks and such, you always have to bear in mind how you're going to manage financially these operations, how you're going to do FinOps, as Sam was saying before.
Absolutely, and we really touch that point of having, for example, the different tools to help you analyze all the cost structure and the spend on the cloud. And I think on this topic, we can also talk about budgeting and alerts. And it's really important to invest time and effort in finding, configuring, and setting the right cost management ecosystems with tools and knowledge that will allow us to govern and control this cloud consumption in order for it not to go overspent. A good tool can save our company or your company a considerable amount of resources, both money and time. So we can rely, as mentioned, on free built-in tools for each cloud service provider, hyperscaler, or on third-party tools to get even more out of those. But as I'm saying, it's not only about using the tools and reviewing some dashboards and managing that cost. It also comes down to really use them to the full potential by configuring those budgets and alerts. And those will really save our lives on some occasions. Budgeting can come even to perform some automated actions for us that can range from triggering an alert at a specific percentage of usage to that budget, or to even stop running the resources in order to not go overspend on that budget. So, for example, if we're talking on R&D environments, then maybe those machines or cloud elements are able to stop in order to not overspend the budget. And if we are talking about production environments, then we definitely want to make sure that we are aware of how much we are spending on that production environment in order to reduce the cost or adjust the budget for us to meet them.
Of course, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think when cloud, I was with Hewlett Packard back in the mid 2000s when cloud was really getting big. And we had such a focus on cross-charge, right? And I feel like that focus has weakened a bit and maybe needs to strengthen. And the reason that focus at the time was so strong, this is 15 years ago, was because we were trying to move IT from being a cost center, meaning that IT cost money but didn't generate money, to being a revenue engine. Right, really supporting the business. And cross-charge is what makes that real, right? Mapping IT costs directly to business value via that internal cross-charge. And having, the other piece is having governance across the board of the spend, meaning starting at sandboxes. I see sandboxes as something that a lot of companies don't really understand the difference between a sandbox and development environment. Development environments should be focused on developing a solution. They are meant to solve a problem, right? To build a new thing, to innovate on something existing. There are places where we do development. Sandboxes are where operators, developers, business analysts, whoever can go and learn something new, try something new without a specific goal. And a good, solid financial governance model says, hey, we're budgeting for sandboxes. We're budgeting for development environments. We're budgeting for UAT. And here's how we're verifying that, these environments are being used for that purpose. And here's how we're measuring how much we're spending on that. And even tying it through to people acquiring certifications, the outcomes of those environments. That's what I mean when I say governance. And I think really having that expanded view and understanding that it is an executive function is very important.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I cannot stress enough the necessity of building, financial operations, governance, cost management as an intrinsic portion of the architecture of your cloud run model. It's super important, something you should never, lose focus on. It's just as important as your security considerations, for example, or performance considerations. It's very, very important topic. I think we're out of time, unfortunately. Thank you all for being here. It was a very informative, very nutritious conversation. I thank you all for your time. Please do not forget to send any questions or comments on the chat feature. And it all starts with learning how you're going to migrate. It all starts with understanding how to assess your possibilities, the viability of going to the cloud, understand all these considerations that we've discussed today. If you want to know more about how to make a proper assessment, a very thorough assessment on how to migrate to the cloud, please visit our webpage, AgileThought.com. You will find fantastic information about our cloud assessment framework. And yeah, see you later.
Bye.
Bye.
See you later.